Hi, everyone. Welcome to our community office hours for project managers. And today we're I guess I should start with introducing myself. My name is Shelley Reed. I am the manager for the Legal Services National Technology Assistance Project. For those of you who may have visual issues or cannot see because you're on your phone, I am a middle-aged white female with brown hair about shoulder length and brown glasses, and we're going to learn some practical tips for project management. And I'm going to turn it over to Heidi.
Hi, my name is Heidi Behnke. I'm with Georgia Legal Services Program. I am the statewide project manager for their organization. I am a, I, I don't know how to put this. I've never had to describe myself on Zoom before. I'd like to think I was blonde, but I think my hair's gone darker since I've gotten older. And I also have glasses. But anyway, today I'm here to talk about practical project management. This is a topic that was highly requested by some members of LSNTAP and people who attended conference or the session in the past. We are trying to have a whole series on different project management topics. I'd be interested in any other ideas you have if you're attending or if you are somebody watching this recording from, I don't know, somewhere in the future. Um, so without any further ado, there we go. So today in this presentation, we're going to get a little bit into different project management methodologies, setups that offices have. I'm going to give you some examples of what I do day to day, and then we're going to go swimming. I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed or like they're drowning in work, so we're going to keep the metaphor going, and we're going to talk about how to get into project management waters. First, ideally in formal project management world, there is something called a project management office. This is an entire department where you have people responsible for standardizing methods in the organization, training people, making sure that you've got larger organizations with qualified people able to take it on. And then if there's more complex projects, maybe it gets broken into parts and can get communicated with each other. It also is a great use for resource management and strategic support for project managers and other team members who are interacting with project managers. In legal aid, we do have some offices that are more advanced and they are at the point where they're getting to PMO level. But more typically, what I see is project management is incorporated as a part of somebody else's existing job. So, for example, you get a new grant that requires a person named project manager, and the managing attorney ends up taking that role. Without formal training, without any kind of understanding sometimes of even what the project is, aside from the fact that they've been given the grant materials. Usually there's only one or two people with expertise or training. It might not be formal, but maybe they're the person who makes things happen, so they get it done, and they're experts in that sense. A lot of people only think of projects as driven by grants. This is not true, especially as you become more used to project management. You start to get more proactive and you see projects outside of that and you become more systemic. And then there's little of the way in templates and historic documents. I think a lot of people don't debrief at the end of a project and they don't preserve best practices or information learned throughout the project, which makes it very hard for future projects to learn from the existing one. And we'll get into some of these things a little bit later. In terms of models, there are two main models of how to handle a project. The first we're going to talk about is Agile, which is iterative, as you can see in the design. It goes from defining the project to designing the project to testing the project to deploying the project. At every stage, you are reassessing how the project fits from start to its eventual goal, and you've broken it up into pieces. This allows for feedback, for change. It can take a little longer sometimes because it takes a lot more feedback and everything's broken up a little bit more. But in the end, an agile project tends to be a lot closer to what the team relies on or the team goal is. It allows for, if life changes in the middle of the project, you can incorporate that and improve as you're going. Waterfall is not iterative. It is more here's start, here's keep going, and here's finish. It does have a risk in terms of the end product not really being flexible. So if something big changes in the middle, sometimes the project is more likely to get scrapped, or sometimes the final result doesn't meet the needs as well as you thought it would. Sometimes this is exactly what you want to happen. Sometimes you just need something to go from A to B and you cannot get it done any other way. There are subfields within these models. Some of you may be familiar with Scrum, for example. That is an agile model. So these are the two to think about, and I think most people are familiar with one or both of them. Um, as far as project management goes, there are some different ways of thinking. Some of you may be great at them already, and some of you may know that there are areas of improvement that need to happen. The first thing I think, as far as qualities a project manager has to have, communication and transparency. Um, you need to be able to effectively make sure that people get information and that you are able to gather information from other people about your project, about the things that are connected to the project. Um, it doesn't work if somebody is trying to only give people what they think they need. It ends up causing a lot of problems if you make the assumptions on that. And if people can't communicate with you or can't ask you questions, it creates a wall and it is likely to impede your ability to manage a project. Collaboration, it's another thing. No project, even if it's just one person working on the grant or what your project is exactly, is a one-person project. It usually has to involve at least one stakeholder, one other person. If you're going to do something that improves other people's ability to work, it's going to involve at least one other person. So teamwork makes the dream work. Organization, a lot of my project, and I'll go into this in just a second actually, is writing status reports, making sure that all my stuff is organized and easy to find, making sure that I incorporate lessons learned and write new best practices. It takes a little bit of getting used to, especially if you're more of an ideas person than somebody who can sit down and write and think analytically. It can be done by everybody. There's different methods and different ways to do it that can work for any different person. But you need to find a way to be organized and continue forward. The last thing I want to talk about in mindsets is failure. I think failure can be a very dirty word in a lot of people's minds. I don't agree with that. I think in project management world, there is always something you can learn from a project, even if it stops before it reaches what the original goal was. Even if the only thing that you learned was there's a brick wall here that we hit, that's something you've learned. And I think in terms of projects that are incomplete or unsuccessful in some way, shape, or form, it's always important to recognize the pieces that came out of that project and the lessons learned because they can help you in the future. Hello, no, no, no. So day to day as a project manager, I have been an informal project manager for probably about 13 years. I started having the title of project manager around 5 years ago, 5 or 6. And then I have formally been in my position as statewide project manager for about 2 to 3 years now. Um, so what do? I currently manage about 15 different projects at one time. Some of them are large and complex, some of them are small and just require a little bit of work. These range from strategic planning and monitoring and reporting work. There's a lot of reporting work, to grant writing and grant reports. I said reporting work a lot. I also identify and implement different process improvements, and I'll make a lot of recommendations to executive leadership and to the people I work with on a day-to-day basis on ways that we can streamline something or maybe better. Some of those get accepted, some of them don't. I have a giant parking lot of issues that people thought were good ideas in general, but we're not at a place where we can enact them. I do a lot of event planning and presentations, just like this one, to try and make sure that we are talking about our work and we are moving forward with a lot of the things that we need to, and collaborating as we need to with teams. So yeah, and I also supervise the other project manager with our organization, so that way we can not just have Heidi doing all the work. Sometimes it's more appropriate for me to have my supervisee involved with something and get different personalities and perspectives as far as managing a project. So now let's learn to swim. Actually, I'll pause here. Any questions that we have about the beginning pieces? I don't see anything, so hearing nothing, I am going to proceed. All right. So this learning to swim section is going to be beginning, intermediate, and advanced. There are a whole series of templates that I've already developed or found, and Shelley has been great about incorporating them onto the LSNTAP website. If you have questions about the templates afterward, I'll have my contact information. You can absolutely write it down. But just be prepared that we're going to talk about some concepts, and some help materials will be available that I think you'll benefit from a lot. So, first one, getting your toes wet. These are things that are not necessarily connected to each other, but help you build project management strengths, and they help you work on one piece at a time, but you don't have to have a whole system together in order to get everything working. So the first one is, if you're going to be working with teams, you need to know how to build it. So have conversations early about roles and responsibilities. Be very explicit about I need this done. Here's the piece that you do. When you're done with this, it goes here. There is a stakeholder register available in the templates. The document will easily show you who needs to be involved where. And it keeps a list of it, so that way you can say this person is identified here. You can also, in notes, just write action items and have a person's name next to it. So it doesn't have to be complex. The important thing is that you're explicit and jotting down who does what. The other piece is identifying your stakeholders and involving them in the project. Part of the stakeholder register also allows you to document who needs to be involved in what way and who needs to be informed of what. Making sure that everybody is communicating already starts improving a team dynamic. And I think it's one of the easiest things that you can start with as a project manager, is just acknowledging who your actual team is and your stakeholders are. Templates. You do not have to reinvent the wheel with it. A lot of resources are available online. First thing, which there is not a template for, is write it down. If you're taking meeting notes, you need it. If you're gonna say, I have this deadline, write the deadline down, put it on the calendar. If something's gonna change, put that down. If it's not written down, and if it's not available for somebody else to make sure they are aware of, it doesn't exist. Kickoff meetings, beginning of a project, get everybody involved. Not everybody, get the people at the top who make decisions involved. When we have a kickoff for a grant, I have the director of accounting, I have the person who's in charge of any departments that are being used. I have the people who are at the top of the team for project management who have major oversight roles and responsibilities. We talk about the requirements of the grant, the deadlines associated with it, who needs to be involved where, what information needs to be transmitted. There's also a start meeting with the entire team that gets involved, but it's more about the substantive, what goes into the project. This one is more of a higher level thing. There is a kickoff form sample in the templates. Status reports, it's exactly what it sounds like. You do not have to have any fancy software for this. For the longest time, we just started using a Word document that everybody could update live, and that helped keep everyone on track. I actually recommend starting with something simple like that. I know it was impactful because one of my supervisors who had a weekly status report would actually print it out, bring it to conferences, and show it off. It really helps make sure that you can keep all the plates spinning, especially if you're a person who has lots of different tasks that seem to have nothing to do with one another. Those can be exhausting, especially if you can't keep track of every different thing. Um, at the end of a project, debrief meetings. Always have a meeting at the end where you talk about what went well, what was a challenge, how you addressed the challenge, what you prefer to see in the future. This is a chance for you to, at the end of a project, at the end of a major milestone, take a look backward and try and learn from that. Having debrief meeting notes and debrief forms can really improve your ability to summarize the project and preserve the knowledge you worked with in the project, rather than have somebody say, I think we did something about this before. Let's go and look through all the notes and all the different things to find it. It's all just going to be summarized in the form for people. And I think some people get scared of this last one. Familiarize yourself with accounting systems and processes. Before, in my early days of doing project management work, was also holding the role of regional operations manager for Georgia Legal, which meant that I was very involved in helping staff get reimbursed, helping make sure grant codes were properly assigned to different things. The knowledge I gained from learning GLSP's accounting system has been amazing in helping plan a lot of the grants. Some organizations are very open about their accounting system. They might not give you all the information, but they'll help you get the pieces of it that you need to assess your expenditures. Other organizations are more closed. If you are working with a project and you have funding that's dedicated to it, either by a grant or you have a budget, I really recommend you getting at least familiar with how the accounting system works in your organization. Technology. At the beginning, I don't recommend getting any project management software. I highly recommend using what you know. That's for several reasons. The first is you're a new project manager and you don't have a system set up at this point. Second is that you've got a team that you're working with who may not be familiar with this system. Then you're going to have to teach them and learn project management skills at the same time and learn a new software. A lot of the things that I learned early on, Excel was perfectly fine. Word was perfectly fine. Being able to identify the things that my team needed as we went on and moved into the second stage, that was more effective at helping me identify what I needed in the next stage. So there's different softwares that are able to do different things. I'm just going to say that it's more important to use what you know and get a sense of how you communicate, how your team works at this part. If you're interested in getting memberships or getting more formal access to project management resources, I am a fan of PMI, the Project Management Institute. I also am certified as a PMP, Project Management Professional. I highly recommend at least getting membership to PMI.org. I've got a link in there that will be available when the presentation is posted. It's just the leading world resource on project management, has a lot of information about basic processes, foundational knowledge, has access to lots of articles and whatnot written about it. And it connects you into a world of project managers. The project management professional degree is a harder one to do, and I don't know if I'd recommend it to people just starting out, but if you really want to get some kind of certification, the Certified Associate of Project Management it's a good step in the water. It's a smaller version of the project management professional certification. And again, link to more resources. Before we go into stage 2, which is taking off the floaties, I just wanted to know, does anyone have questions about basics? We're going to be very quiet today. All right. So basics are us moving from the stage of just getting the toes wet to starting to form a system that allows us to move forward and become a more unified team of project managers, or creating a system that helps you move from I just have these bits and pieces to I'm more organized and can do more advanced things. As far as building your team goes, resources and planning, needs assessments. You've got resources, human and physical, and you've got needs for the project. being able to identify exactly what resources you need and what gaps you have and be able to communicate those things will help build your ability to talk with your team and obtain the resources that you need. If you can easily see, I'm missing this. If I had this, I would be able to do this better. You'd be able to have a better ask and you'd be more likely to get the pieces that you need. I highly recommend people finding presentations and working on studies to improve conflict management and effective resolution strategies. The larger your team gets, the more complicated your team gets, the more likely you are to encounter conflict. As a project manager, you are likely not to be the supervisor directly over the individuals on your team. That's not true for everyone, especially in a legal aid setting. It might be that you're just overseeing your own team normally. But if you're not a supervisor, you have to learn how to communicate with supervisors when something goes wrong. You are the supervisor of the project. And I just brush up on those skills. It's always worthwhile, even if you've been doing it for years. I think it's always a thing that people should be learning about. Stakeholder communications and management. Learning how the systems work of communication, setting up a schedule to say, on this day, I am going to send this email or I'm going to send this update. I'm going to have these meetings on this calendar, and be able to say, have a system will improve your ability for your stakeholders to be engaged because they'll know the calendar associated with when they can expect what. And as you become more professional as a project manager, they will start to know how you operate and they'll be able to engage with you more effectively. In terms of your templates and practices, start building a plan. A formal project plan is kind of a bear of a thing. It has official ways of doing contract management and stakeholder management, special communications management, budget management. You don't need all of that. Idea would be, I have these requirements. I need to be able to get from X to Y, and just figure out to the best of your ability how you feel like you're going to get from that. Write things down as you're learning them. Get used to being required to do an edit or two. What you're trying to do here is experiment with how you're thinking versus how things actually work out. Your plan might be perfect. That would be great. There's also going to be changes and you have to get used to that. But the idea of that's what the idea of a plan is at this stage. Contracts and procurement are something I think that some people aren't familiar with, especially if they're not familiar with the accounting process in their organization. Every organization should have their own policy on how they obtain contracts or how they work with outside vendors. Some people are familiar with the RFP process, request for proposal. In terms of contract management, the template that I've provided has a sample of how we created questions on how we were going to evaluate contracts, and then everybody is evaluated in the same exact way. It avoids us going with just, oh, my gut feeling says this, or my friend organization that I like better has this. It just allows you to really strategically look at the material provided. A note on gut feelings really quickly, though. If your gut is really telling you that something is off, do explore that. People have gut feelings for a reason. It may be nothing, it may be something to look into, but do explore why you may be thinking that you're having a gut reaction to one thing or another. You also, at this stage, start experimenting with metrics. I have provided a fairly convoluted example of how our pro bono unit measures progress from A to B. It's an Excel spreadsheet because I love Excel. But you can see how we have a lot of data points, but it moves toward a smaller system of metrics that we can easily talk about and make sure that pieces are intact. This is a time where you're getting used to talking about what features are important. you have to get, when you're more formal, down to a smaller set. I think in strategic planning, people talk about not having more than 10 criteria that help you know if a project is on track or if you're meeting your plan or if you're achieving goals in general. At early stages, I don't know that everybody's going to be as skilled knowing what success looks like. So practice coming up with, this is what I think success looks like, and then see if there's another measure that would be better. See if there's different ways that you can incorporate those metrics into other things, or if that metric maybe doesn't give you the information you thought you wanted, but it gives you a piece of the information you wanted. Budgets. Huge fan of accounting again. If you have the ability to, start creating a budget. This is not the expenditures piece of it. This is talking about what you think you'll need to spend during X, Y, and Z time and what factors you think go into it. Do monitor expenditures, but do realize that your knowledge of budgets, especially if you're not as familiar with your accounting processes, it may take some fine tuning. Monitor and control activities. Obviously, continue to watch your project as it's happening. And if you see issues, start taking actions to correct. When your project changes mid-project, that's when you'll get to a place where you have to document change. I have included a change request form in the templates, so that way you can see how that formally looks and you can get a sense of how you put a big change into a project and communicate it to the team effectively. Technologies to look for. I am not in this presentation going to recommend any specific software, but because there are so many and they do so many things. What I would recommend is starting to look at specific features. A lot of people are familiar with Kanban boards, Kanban, which is where you have different sections and your tasks can fit under one or more, oh, not or more, one place or another. It can move around. So it could be in progress and stalled and ready for completion, and you would just move the task along as you're going. Gantt charts are more of a scheduling visual of your tasks. So you can see this one is going to start here and this one's going to start in the middle of this one, or it starts 10 days after. And it can give you a visual of your timeline in a new way. Task assignments, being able to identify this person's role and responsibility. That's a huge feature of things that you'd like to see in a early project management software. And deadlines, being able to set a deadline, especially if it can email you, the system can email you a timeline or, hey, this one's approaching the deadline, can be very useful. So if it integrates with your email system or if you're able to send those messages back, being able to keep track of that, it just takes a load off. Certifications. We are now at the end of the middle section. If you are at this point and you're getting more into project management and it's really becoming a thing at your office, I do recommend getting the project management professional certification. It requires 3 to 5 years of experience as a project manager. It does not require 3 to 5 years with a title as project manager. Most people in legal aid organizations, especially the attorneys, do have experience managing projects. Just because if you've managed a case, you've managed a project. There is an application period or process, and it is pretty liberal in how you document that time. There is also an Agile certified practitioner, which that is specifically when you're dealing with the iterative process that is Agile. This is where I think a lot of people are interested in going. Waterfall is not the highly recommended way of moving forward, but Agile absolutely is, and there's several methodologies that fall under it. Are we ready for the deep end? Any questions so far?
Everyone's really quiet so far.
I know. All right, so thriving in the deep end. You have learned to swim and you are ready to be a project manager and have an office that's doing things, and you've got people assigned to just project management. If you are working really well in the deep end, your team now is able to say, I'm going to need this person in the future. I have this resource need here. I need to schedule this out, and I need to make sure that the team knows exactly when I need them and how I need them. You are going to have training for your team on general project management practices, and you're going to make sure that your team has everything that they need before the project starts. At this point, you may be able to consider getting a PMO. If your project management office exists, it will help all of the other project managers in your team or in your organization collaborate a little bit better. The resources here, and as you'll see in the rest of this presentation, are all becoming more predictive instead of measuring reactions. Practices and templates. I have a risk management template that came from the Department of Health and Human Services, I believe. It actually is a really great resource for identifying and measuring risk, and it has instructions on how to do it. I think it was designed specifically for organizations dealing with COVID issues, for how to react to if COVID plans were going to move forward or whatnot. So it was definitely an emergency document, and it shows how to move forward with certain things. But it's got tons of instructions. It's got different views of how to take risks and go from basic level identifying all the way down to intensive, like this specific risk is going to mean this specific thing. I will also recognize in project management language, risk is not necessarily negative. It's also opportunities. So how to seize good opportunities and make sure you're ready to jump on board versus how to avoid negative risks, and how to make sure that you're dealing with those and addressing those effectively are both encompassed under risk management. Cost management. This one is, you are definitely besties with your accounting department. You are monitoring everything. You are planning your budgets. You are predicting what's going to be happening in the future. And you're going to be able to identify all of the pieces at the same time and react to what you need there. Strategic planning. This is not necessarily a piece that you do as a project manager, but for those of you who do, basics of strategic planning is identifying where you are, where you want to go, and then putting the path to get there. All organizations should have a strategic plan. Some are more effective at developing these than others. If you have a seasoned project manager, I think it's always something that you should be trying to incorporate in your organization and helping them move toward a strategic plan. Sometimes it's still beneficial to contract with somebody outside, at least for part of that process, just to eliminate any bias internally that you might have, but that's a whole different topic. Technologies. Now that you've got your systems on board and you know what you're doing, this is when you get to get predictive project manager technologies. Features that you absolutely want in your system, you want to measure dependencies. This cannot happen until this happens. This ends only when this ends. This needs to wait for this time. It's one of the biggest features that I have with any project. This is when Gantt charts definitely take a new level, because you're seeing a timeline and you're seeing how everything works. If you get really into project management lingo, this is where you get your critical path to see exactly how long your project will take. And if something is delayed, how does that affect everything else down the line? Measuring effort required is a particularly complex one, and I'm not going to pretend I've even mastered it yet. This one is where you estimate how much of a person's time it will take to complete this much of the work of the project. There are features within softwares that have it. It takes a lot of getting used to and a lot of experience working with different team members and understanding your timekeeping strategies to actually be able to calculate that. But effort required is a feature of a lot of softwares. And AI assistants, these are, I'm really excited about, but haven't had a chance to play with them as much as I'd like. They can learn how you operate a project and then get predictive to the point where they build out all the pieces you need of the project. So if you need these folders, if you need these steps, if these people need to be involved, it can start building your template and make sure that you've got that. It can also say, hey, this task hasn't been completed yet. Why don't you go help with that? It can create and then simple ones that you're thinking of also, it can take notes and analyze them and give you good summaries of notes. All of these basic, more admin features, AI actually can do them. And because it's not necessarily involving client specific or identifying information, I think a lot of organizations, even those that are hesitant about AI, are probably going to be a little bit more interested in something like this. This is also the point where you bring the teams to you. At the very beginning, when you were just getting your toes wet, you do whatever system people have. You do what they're comfortable with. By the time that you're more expert at this, you can bring people to you and you can say, this is the tool we're using for this project. I have this training I will show you how to use. This is why we're using this, and people will be much more interested in working with it because they can see the benefit and they see how it's applied. If you're really at this deep end point, this is when the advanced certifications come out. PMO, that's not super advanced, but if you're not at the point where you're having a project management office, I don't recommend getting a PMO certification. The exam info is linked there. Risk management professional is the toughest of the PMI courses. It is essential when you're talking about managing risk and learning how to do that. Each of these comes with a lot of education material that you have to review first. However, risk management is not something that you can get until you're ready to be predictive and you're ready to move from a more, here's where I am now, to I need to be able to look in the future and know how we're going to address opportunity or negative risk. Program management professional, for those of you who attended our last session, projects are single temporary endeavors. Programs consist of multiple projects and they are more unified. And then portfolios consist of multiple programs, multiple projects, which may or may not be unified in what they're doing, but they all do fall under a specific umbrella. For example, your organization has a bunch of different programs and projects in it, but your housing team is not necessarily the same as your finance team. We have gotten through all of the basics of what it looks like as practical project managers. I am ready for overall questions. I hope this was helpful.
I have a question.
Go for it.
Okay. So I became a project manager 2 years ago, but to continue your metaphor, I was thrown into the deep end, had no project management training whatsoever. And I am worried that I have sort of messed up because I did not follow a lot of the things you said, but which I think are very good advice. I don't think I've had like very regular communication with the stakeholders and a whole bunch of other things. And I guess my question, what I'm worried about is how do I sort of pull things back and write the course now? If it's been 2 years and things I feel a little bit like I'm drowning. And so how do I gain back, sort of the trust of the stakeholders, and how do I write the course now that I've learned from my failures, but I'm not quite sure how to get back on track?
So my recommendation on that, first I have a question actually. 2 years, where is your project almost done? Is your project in the middle of it? Is it the same project as you started with?
Yeah, same project. We are months behind schedule, of course, and hoping to launch a website soon. But we've been hoping that for months. So I don't know. I would say middle to endish of the first stage.
Okay, so what I would do is I would have a meeting with your stakeholders and with your team. It might need to be several meetings if you have different people who are interested in different things. And I would just say, hey, we've had some challenges going through this part. Here's some of the stuff that we've learned, but we want to be even better. And how can we work better with you to make sure that we reach this goal? If the goal has changed over the period of time from when you started to when you ended, make sure everybody remembers this is what our purpose is and this is where we're trying to go. And that initial transparency really helps build trust. But it also can start just setting everybody on the right foot again and getting their eye on the prize.
Thanks, that's really helpful.
Thank you.
I have more questions if other people don't, but I'll step back and see if other people have questions.
I'm happy to answer more.
So I don't have a team per se. I'm the only person at I'm at a legal aid organization. I am the only project manager. I'm the only person really working on this other than I have a supervisor. And I feel like I've gotten really mixed messages from my supervisor in terms of like, what can I ask the stakeholders to do? Like, I feel like if I ask them to do things, I've been told you can't really ask them to do work outside of just coming to these meetings. But I haven't been involved in like or asked to be involved in a lot of the cost discussions. Like they'll have budget discussions and I'm not invited to these things. So I'm confused about like what my role is. And maybe it's just something you might just recommend I just be really upfront and ask them about it. Just probably what I should do. But
I am a huge fan of just saying what you need, but I do understand that sometimes it's people aren't comfortable with that, but also B, you're not in a position where somebody will give you the information even if you are upfront. So it's a weird position sometimes.
yeah, I don't know. I also don't know if any of these problems are typical of being a project manager since I've never been one before.
They are absolutely, they're typical of being a human and navigating any of the waters in any kind of corporation, especially if project management is new to your organization. There is, and Shelley, we should talk about doing this maybe next year. There's a whole theory or conversation we can have about different organization mindsets and how to navigate those as a project manager. Some are more hierarchical and you have to do this a certain way, and some are more egalitarian and you have to navigate that a different way. So I definitely think that's a thing for the future. In terms of how to identify your role or how to get more idea about how you interact with others, I would look at that stakeholder register form, because that way you can easily say, this person is involved in this way, and then it can help you identify how you're supposed to interact with them. Ideally, you would also have a standard job description. I am convinced that most people do not have an up-to-date job description in legal aid world, period. But I think having a stakeholder register form and trying to understand your relation to all of the people who impact or are impacted by your project will help you have a better conversation with your supervisor.
Thanks.
Yeah,
So I too have been like hurled into the deep end of, oh, what if we set up a project management office? And I saw there's the giant list of things you can be trained to do. I think that I'm mostly being asked to establish an office more so than I am being asked to actually be a project manager, in part because this is our first brush with organized project management in that way. Do you think it's worth my while to like sit for the PMP, or should I just jump straight to like the PMO part and then backfill later?
There was a link that I have, actually, I think it was just the past slide, to the PMO certified. I think that one's free. I haven't looked at it in a bit because my organization is definitely not ready for a PMO. But I do think taking that exam will help you understand more about where you fit in, and it's not the full PMP. I think if your organization is developing a PMO but doesn't have formal project management, they probably, correct me if I'm wrong, want you to do more trainings for staff so they can be better managers of projects. Is that accurate?
I think the organizational goal at the moment is we need a proof of concept, because selling 500 lawyers on the idea that they should do additional paperwork is a tough sell at the best of days. And so we're mostly deploying this within like the IT department itself rather than a like firm-wide thing. But my experience has been that if it involves buttons, it eventually becomes an IT department project. So I think that's a distinction about marketing rather than a distinction about organizational structure.
Yes.
And so part of what I'm trying to do, because like officially my title changed a few weeks ago, and I'm still in the midst of like taking my hands out of all of the stuff that I was doing last year so that I can do this. But a big part of what I need to do here is pick up a set of formalized training so that everyone can be speaking a single language. Otherwise, we're going to run all of this the way I ran projects in repertory musical theater like 10 years ago. And that's
those are good projects with a lot of personalities.
I mean, it has given me a wonderful set of skills, like the ability to have a cogent and respectful conversation while everyone in the room is screaming obscenities at each other, which is not a thing I've had to do in my current role. But I am like, the amount of possible information is a little bit overwhelming at the moment. And so I'm trying to figure out like, what is my shortest path to competence? How do I get myself to a place where I can get everybody else to something that looks like better?
Yes.
So that I can then go back around and say, hey, and now I want you to invest some dollars in staff time.
Yeah. So definitely the PMO thing. If you become a member, I'm trying to think of all the ways without you having to take super tough exams that will give you a lot of information, but not necessarily help you sell it. If you join PMI, you have access to a whole lot of different free trainings, especially I think twice a year. They have online global expos where they just have the entire day project management related topics in a whole different ways. You as a tech person actually will benefit more because a lot of project management, the most formal offices tend to be from tech and construction. There are obviously differences and there's things that apply across it, but the way that people encounter it, you'll know a whole lot from that.
Okay, well, that's good. I
Yeah.
feel very validated. Thank you. I joined them last week.
Yay. So you'll get to see some of that. And I think usually March is one of them, and then there's one in summer. So you'll see that. I also think if you start in areas of stakeholder management, you'll probably benefit more because a lot of this is making sure that your stakeholders understand scope and they help make sure that you're going in the right direction. And you're having to manage upward too. So I think trying to focus in those areas will help you better set boundaries and define what your role would be as a PMO director / project manager. And maybe some of it is just as simple as instead of being called a project manager, call yourself a PMO director. And people will have questions, but it'll open a conversation rather than just say, oh, you manage the project.
Handily, my title was changed to head of project management office, so it's
Fantastic. So you
very
are the
descriptive.
PMO. Yes. All right. So you are set up for a lot of the basics, but I can understand why that would be feeling like thrown into the deep end.
I have no staff right now, so that part's fun. I feel very I feel a lot of kinship with the person who just asked you a couple of questions.
But yeah, I think you're probably looking at more training for others. Absolutely, especially a lot of attorneys avoid tech and pushing buttons is not there. But yeah, work on setting boundaries and defining yourself more, and then you'll be able to define more to your staff and to other people, and they'll know what to come to you for. And hopefully it's not just pressing buttons.
Thank you.
Other questions? I'm gonna end on this one so that way it's at least on the recording. LSN Tap has a wonderful site where they're hosting all sorts of project management stuff, including the templates and this presentation. There is also a Google group that is coming up for project managers. So similar to the LSN Tap listserv that we've got, we have a separate one coming for project managers. You can access all of that on the site, again, linked in the presentation. You can also contact me directly. I am happy to offer, if not sympathy, I'm happy to offer ideas and to just help brainstorm different things. I have hit my head against brick walls more often than I care to admit. And I've had to navigate it in a legal aid setting. So I feel like I am at least in a position where I can help you also maybe get some better armor when you're going into that kind of setting.
So thank you for joining us today. I hope that this was helpful information. We do have that resource on our website, and we'll be posting the video for reuse. And please feel free to share and join us for our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.